Good morning, everyone. Here we have bzPython. This is something we've developed BizBox, and it's already shared. And you're feel free to download this demo file. It takes you through the process of how to install bbox and help you with the installation of Python and in both locally and server side. And most importantly for Python, it helps you a lot with how to install the different packages, and you can go through the code into this demo file and use it into your solutions. It also has a workshop page that you can just try Python code. And we have 3 different demos here that you can try out as well. So all of this, you can get it on our website. I'm a senior developer at BizBox. I've been professional FileMaker developer for the past 11 years now. I'm certified FileMaker, of course, and also AWS certified developer. I've spoken before at various FileMaker related conferences, both the old DevCon and conferences in Europe as well. As Jay mentioned, I'm taking my master's in computer science at Georgia Tech. And I'm originally from Cyprus and currently in the process of moving to Brazil. And in whatever free time I have, I'm also an amateur astronomer. This is a photo that I took of a galaxy that has a supernova explosion right there, the big bright star. So the agenda for today is to give you a small intro into Python. What Python is and its history, and more importantly for this group, we're gonna talk about why Python is a good match for any FileMaker developer. We're gonna go through the integration methods that are possible with Python. And at the end, we're going to show a demo. For example, here on the right, you can see an exported Excel file that we can use Python to generate. So Python was created back in the late 80s by Guido von Rossum, and it was released in 1991. It has a very unfortunate name, in my opinion, because I am scared of snakes. But it doesn't have to do with the animal itself. It's actually named after the Monty Python's Flying Circus comedy. However, it was developed with the focus of code readability and simplicity. On the right here, you can see 2 bits of code. On the top, we have the Python code to print out a sum of the first 10 numbers, and below that you have the code for Java. And you can pretty much read through the Python code, and with Java, you're usually just looking at it and seeing, oh, what does this do? So that's really the main focus of Python. Of course, over the years, because demand for Python has increased, some more, I'd say, weird syntax has been added to it, but it's still pretty much readable, I'd say. One important concept of Python is the use of indentations. So at the top part where you see the on the third line is indented in, it's very important to have a tab indentation so that that part of that part of the code gets wrapped into the loop. Python 2 has been around from 2000 to 2008, but then they released Python 3, which is the current release of Python, and they introduced major changes back then. It's basically taken a little more than 10 years to get modernize the old code that was based on Python 2. But it's Python 2 nowadays, it's considered more obsolete. Python is a high-level general-purpose language. You can use it for pretty much anything. It's an interpreted language, doesn't need a compiler, and it's dynamically typed. It has a strong support for modularity, and it's also object-oriented programming. The really cool thing about Python is that it has a rich ecosystem and a huge standard library, but more importantly, it's the third-party packages which are growing every day. It's cross-platform compatible, and it has a very large active community. I've been to PyCon in Germany for the past couple of years, and that event alone is has 1,500 attendees. Every year it's sold out for the past few years, and it's also combined with PyData for data science. Basically, that's using Python. And so, yeah, the community alone is it's incredible throughout the world, not just in Europe. These are some statistics from the Stack Overflow survey showing the popularity of Python among developers. It's pretty much ranked, I would say, nearly at the top. It really depends on how you rank this, but these are a couple of other indices that put Python really up there at the top most wanted and most used languages out there. Even if you don't really believe some of these statistics, I would say definitely it's in the top 5, no matter what, no matter what metric you use. So why is Python a good match for any FileMaker developer? And I found this very useful for myself, is that Python is synchronous by default. You don't get to mess around with the asynchronous nature of JavaScript, for example. You can make it asynchronous as well if you want to. That's perfectly fine and allowed to do in Python. But it's just basically a script. You can write a script in Python that runs end-to-end, just like how we have with FileMaker. The object-oriented programming, which again can be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you're coming just from a FileMaker background. It's not enforced in Python. You can use it if you want to. You can write your classes and everything. But if you just want to write a simple one-pager script or a couple of pages, then that's totally fine as well. The code readability and simplicity kind of mimics what we have in the FileMaker as well. And it's really cool that the large number of packages, especially in PyPy. I think there are some other sites that have Python packages, but PyPy is considered the number one page to get packages. Yeah, and the large active community, it's really useful, even if you, for example, you get started with a FileMaker and Python project and you can't really continue with that, or you cannot maintain it, or there's a huge community out there to help you. And now we'll go through some integration methods that are available. I'll start with the most obvious one. Is there a plugin for it? Yes, there are at least 3 plugins that I know that can use Python inside of FileMaker. First of all is our home brew plugin, bbox, which you can pass you can pass the script, your Python script, in as a text. Your in the different parameters to this script. Specifically mode 16. Oh, you need to specify the mode as well for how the Python would run. You can find all this in the documentation, but usually mode 16 is good for most people, especially when you have different versions of Python, and mode 16 uses the default Python 3 executable. The other 2 plugins out there is MBS and base elements, but I think the difference with those is that they run using a script as part of an external file. Another integration method would be to use a serverless technique. All the main cloud computing providers, such as AWS and Azure, they have serverless service, and Python is supported in all these major providers. It's very easy once you get the basic infrastructure in place to write the code and to maintain the code, and to be able to reuse the code into other projects as well. The cool thing also about this technique is that there are no servers to manage, and the cost is very, very little. It's pay as you use, and the usage is usually very small, especially for projects that relate to FileMaker. We don't have extremely large systems that handle millions of transactions, let's say, every day. So the cost is usually very, very low. You can have a QR code here if you want to take a look at and engage at the session that I've done to Engage You 2022 about Rabbit serverless integration, where I use Python there as the main language. And in that session, I also explain what the infrastructure that you need to set up at AWS so that you can run your code. And the example that I mentioned there is to make an integration with SquareUp, which is a payment system, to leverage the Python SDK, which is ready, and to write very little code and be able to have access to the entire API of SquareUp. Another method would be to use, of course, an on-premise solution, or the data API. This technique can work by building up a middleware application that can be hosted either on-premise or on the cloud as an EC2 instance. It could reside on the same server as FileMaker server, or you can spin up a completely new server if you want to. The reason why you would use this method over serverless would be to have maybe better control of the data flow. If you, for some reason, in terms of security or confidentiality, you cannot share any data with external providers. There are a couple of options. One is to use Flask, and the other one is Fast API. These two are web frameworks that you can actually build websites using these frameworks. But they are very light, especially Flask is a very light web framework. So with very little code, you can just generate a REST API, and this application can run whatever Python code you need it to, and get back the results using data API. And the data exchange with FileMaker can be done with curl, of course, through FileMaker, and you can define your own query parameters or use post. You can customize whatever, however you want. And the communication backwards from these applications into FileMaker could be part of a response, or it could be part of, or you can use the data API. For example, here I mentioned the Python-FM REST -FM REST package written by David Hammond. It's a pretty established package, I'll say, at this moment to use with Python. Now, the next technique, it's going to take me a couple of slides to explain. So there's this other technology, it's called WebAssembly. WebAssembly, it's a binary instruction format. And what it does is that it allows you to run code from multiple programming languages, including, of course, Python, and right into your browser. All modern browsers are supported. And it provides a near native performance. And you can actually run pretty complex applications and libraries directly through the browser. The good thing about WebAssembly is that it's portable and it doesn't rely on the platform either. So you can see like you can have JavaScript, you can have Go, C, or Python, and these all compile to this WebAssembly module, and it has to be hosted as part of a VM, and then it generates the HTML that's browsed, you can see through your browser. Specifically for Python, the implementation of WebAssembly, it's called Pyodide, and it provides a more fast and efficient way to execute Python code. It also seamlessly integrates with Python and JavaScript and the other variable web APIs. So you can have access to all the scientific libraries, for example, NumPy, Pandas, and Matplotlib, which are like the most popular ones in the data science world, especially, and whenever you have to do with analytics. So this is the architecture behind PyScript. PyScript was developed by Anaconda. Again, a snake reference. And then you can see the stack there on the right-hand side. It starts with WebAssembly, then Pyodide, and at the top we have PyScript. The way that the bidirectional communication works with JavaScript is to use the import.js command at the beginning of your script. It's still pretty much in alpha, but it's being developed very heavily by Anaconda, so there is progress that's been done on that front. And although it does run with many Python packages, not all of them, of course, but two main packages that are not supported is tkinter, which generates graphical GUI, graphical user interface applications on a computer. So that's impossible to implement actually. And also requests, which is due to the nature of the sandboxing of the applications on the browser, that it is not able to communicate via HTTP request, basically. So all this sounds very, very complicated. So you can assume that the installation will be very, very complicated as well, which is actually not. It's only a couple of lines of code that you need to add at the header section of your page, of your web viewer. One, it's just a reference to the style sheet, and the other one, it's just the actual script itself. We'll see this as part of the demo as well right now. So I have here this demo file, and I'm going to show you examples of some short examples of using bbox, either using bbox or using PyScript. So the code for this little script, it's just a simple hello world. And I can run this with bbox, and we can get out the it returns back the results from the standard output. Now, how would PyScript work? It's the same exact script as before, but it runs through a web viewer, and you still get exactly the same results. Now, another useful thing that you can do is, of course, to generate Excel files using Python. And the code here uses a library called XLX Writer. And yeah, you can, using this package, you can just, create your workbook, specify its size, the columns, add your formatting. It's really, really powerful. And just, write your data. You can do things like freeze panes, which is something pretty useful in large Excel documents. And yeah, at the end of this script, you can just save the data back into FileMaker. All that runs through a web viewer. And you get this Excel spreadsheet, which is some of the data that's already in another table. You can also integrate with other APIs. This is the some of the examples that I've shown as part of the other session that I mentioned earlier. So the code there is so the code here is pretty similar to that, and it leverages the standard packages from Square, and we can call Square with just a few lines of code, and we can just get back a JSON of the customers, for example. And you can basically query it with anything, or send data to the Square API. In this demo here, we're going to show how you can even generate things like graphs using matplotlib. As I mentioned, it's one of the standard libraries that comes as part of PyScript. It's already loaded there. Another example would be to show you how fast you can process basically data in using Python. So what this script does is that it creates a list of 10 million random numbers, and it's testing against three different options to basically generate the average values of these 10 million random numbers using either just a simple Python function, using NumPy, and using pandas.
So Christos, I wanted to mention to the audience, if you have questions, after this part of the demo, maybe we can pause for a moment. But if you have questions, post them in the chat. And one thing just on that point about processing, one of the questions is like, why use Python versus something native to FileMaker or some other language? I think this is probably one of the things that people have been doing a long time, is using Python or JavaScript or Java or Ruby or something else outside of FileMaker to process lots of, like you said, 10 million points of data, because that can be a lot faster than native functions to pass it out to that. So if it's processing that data or parsing JSON or regex or things like that, sometimes you can do that outside of FileMaker and see 5x, 10x, 20x, 100x speed improvement, right?
Exactly. That's a very important use case for all this. The big performance boost that you can get compared to using native FileMaker and using Python or even JavaScript, of course. But especially if you have very large data sets, then it's probably unavoidable to use either Python or JavaScript to process that data. However, I mentioned JavaScript as an alternative, but in terms of performance and tools available to do such processing, Python has a better standing than JavaScript. It varies, of course. It depends on the use case.
Great. Okay, so again, if you have questions, put them in the chat, and we'll get to those. We should have some time to get to those soon. Thanks.
Thank you. So yeah, as you can see here, it takes to average those numbers, it takes like fractions of a second, and you can actually see here how fast NumPy and pandas are compared to Python. Like NumPy is really quick, like 4.5 times more faster than Python. Pandas is 2.3 times faster. So these two are, let's say, mainstream libraries, packages that are used and very, very useful and efficient to run calculations. We can also show some visual analytics, for example. Again, I'm using PyScript, but you can also code this and use plugins like VBox to get outputs of different charts. You can output them in files and save them or display them into FileMaker, of course. So yeah, I'm using just some data. I'm doing some analytics with the data, or you can even get like summary statistics as well. Now the final example, it's a little bit of a surprise. I want to save for the end. So I'm just going to run this. So now I have an app that's generated. It's a Python app, so you get this little rocket over here. No snakes required. And you can just, I created this form. It's a graphical user interface that's generated using code, and I can submit the data. I'm just using the FMP URL to send the data back into FileMaker. So yeah, the code for this is not something huge. It's very simple using the tkinter package that I mentioned earlier. And yeah, you can generate like a small application if you need to. It doesn't have to be a form like I did here in this example. It could be other things that you want to display, something that might be a little bit more complicated to do in FileMaker, or it could be some sort of other application that's already out there and you want to port it into FileMaker without having to rewrite everything as a FileMaker solution. Yeah, that's all I have for today. Questions?
Great. There is one question from Sam about, is it only for online development? Could we develop offline, like install packages on local environment? And I believe all your demos that you're running right now are running locally with FileMaker Pro and local Python. So either way, you can develop locally, you can even run it locally, or the power of FileMaker is running things through FileMaker server. And you could do that, you could do approaches with either plugins or data API to run across the network and also call things outside like AWS Lambda functions or other things, right?
Yeah, exactly. As you said, I'm running everything locally. I'm running my own installation of Python, and I'm handling the packages as well, the install necessary packages behind the scenes. But if you use if you need to use something like PyScript, you don't need to install anything. You just code, and the packages are already part of PyScript. They are loaded in to the using the WebAssembly. But yeah, you can install Python on the server. You can install packages there, and when you run bbox or other plugins server side, then you'll be able to run Python code there as well.
Okay. Another question. What's the difference in terms of execution speed between bbox and MBS plugin? I know generally speaking, we haven't tested MBS with Python. MBS runs pretty well. That one difference of MBS running things through a script file versus bbox running it as in the plugin architecture would imply that bbox could run as fast or faster, but I don't know if it's a subtle difference or a major one. Simon, who's here, he's the developer of bbox. He may have and plugins may have an idea, or Christos, you may know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Simon, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'm not familiar enough with how Monkeybright is implemented to know for sure. There is actually, it's probably pretty comparable. I will point out though, there's actually two modes of accessing Python and bbox, and one is more tightly connected to FileMaker. And for instance, in that one, for better or worse, you can natively in Python, you can reference tables in FileMaker, and so since that's using the execute SQL facilities of FileMaker, it can get it as fast as execute SQL can provide it to Python.
Okay, great. Thanks. So great question from the other Christos. Different spelling, but one of my two favorite Christoses in the world. Can you implement, so basically custom LLM server instructions from Claris using bzPython? And that's a question of, so FileMaker 2024 has AI script steps and other built-in functionality. So you can call a lot of that natively through script steps. The plugin architecture is maybe just one off from that. You get script steps that bbox provides and other things. But if you're calling Python, you're basically like, of course you can call an LLM with Python. But then you're controlling most of that and writing most of that in Python and then executing it, as opposed to the not having to break out of programming within FileMaker. But do you want to shed any more light on the realities of that, or how we'd approach like LLMs? And to clarify, the blog post, so the Claris engineering blog, and I would recommend that you take a look at the chat for the link to it, the Zoom chat. The blog is about spinning up a local LLM to use with the native script steps. So it's also a question about like, how do you run an LLM, and especially, as you say, running it locally, like the deployment of LLMs is, the other half of the equation from actually calling them from within FileMaker. Great question. Christos, other Christos or Simon, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the pretty good use case for what I'm trying to present here, like how we can integrate Python with FileMaker, is that most of the times, when you're dealing with LLMs, usually this is done through someone, not to basically call an API, but to actually build the models themselves. These models are usually built they are built using Python, and they are built using, for example, by a data scientist using a Jupyter notebook. And then all that code is already written in Python, so there isn't really much sense to rewrite all of that code into something else to so that you can do an implementation. And I don't know if that's even possible or not to do. And so this way you can just reuse exactly the codes that maybe the client can provide you with their model, and being able to integrate this with FileMaker. That could mean that the data would reside in FileMaker and you would have the interaction, or the data might be some larger data source, and this model can feed to it and provide, let's say, using generative AI, some responses to through FileMaker. Yeah.
Yeah, but to respond to the question from the other Christos, there are some, like, this Claris is now supporting Python in, you have to check out the blog. I recommend everyone check out this blog post, because there is there's some support for Python running there. And there's some things you can do with their goal is, to support, like they have examples with Hugging Face, open source models and other things like that. So that's pretty promising. And there's always a question of performance as well. We don't know what this performance is compared to putting it outside, but yeah. An open question.
Yeah, and at least in the case of the bbox, one of the bbox Python modes, you can so the bbox Python run function is sort of a one-shot atomic kind of thing, by default at least. And so basically, you run your task and in sort of a batch mode. You run your task and it executes, and maybe it returns some output back to FileMaker. But there is the other mode. You can do things like start up a instance of a given Python module, and then interact with it, because you're able to, for instance, get the variables that are from FileMaker. You can get a value of a variable that is, in the running context of Python, or execute, just an arbitrary function in, within that same Python context that was, from the running environment. But I will say it is much easier from a design standpoint. It is pretty tricky to do that sort of more interactive interfacing of Python and FileMaker. It's much nicer when it's kind of more of a one-shot thing that you're working with. There are fewer complications in your code.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, and there's always the bigger question of how do FileMaker devs work together with Python devs, let's say. Do you learn it yourself? Do you partner with someone? We tend to have teams and a lot of development shops, Claris partners, have people who specialize in things, JavaScript and other PHP, Java, Python, and so it's a collaborative effort. Being able to pull models in and code that's packaged is a lot of what we want to be able to do as FileMaker devs with AI and machine learning. But we also have to live in the world of, this is how some of this is how does a FileMaker dev live in the world of Python as well, which is always fun to figure out. All right. No, I don't see any other questions. Julian, did you want to? We have 9 minutes left, but Julian, I think you may have wanted to say something.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. And just a few comments. So there would be time for a couple more questions, perhaps, right before the end. But thank you, Christos. Great presentation.
Okay.
And Simon, as always, and Jay for pulling this together. So nicely, we have 2/3 current beeswax employees on this call, and that for 1/3 of folks who are not currently beeswax employees. And towards that end, I have a few comments about the future and about our recruitment. But just to go back a moment, the file that Christos was referring to, the bzPython-FM, is what we call a bz module. And I just want to make sure that, especially people who are not currently part of beeswax, although looking at the list, most people are fairly familiar with beeswax, I think. But nevertheless, you may not know sort of the full set of modules like bzPython-FM that are available for free from our website. So I'm actually going to just put that link into the thread, and it's actually on the products page. So the bulk of our products actually are free, and there's a set like bzPython-FM that are very light. The documentation is there to help guide you. There are starter files, demo files that come along for the ride to get you going, and they're things that are generally you can use on your own. They're not exactly plug and play necessarily, but they're getting you going without needing any input from us. Although, of course, with all of these things, we're happy to also help. And so you can sort of peruse the products at the top of the product page, and then these BZ modules. There's 9 of them currently on the latter part of the page. And as sort of this demo sort of illustrates, and Jay spoke to nicely, part of what we're enjoying at beeswax. 28 years into our FileMaker work, it's that the FileMaker team of about 55 now is highly integrated with our web, DevOps, data science, UX teams, and so that we get to work on projects that are kind of more interesting and complex, and certainly look to keep expanding our breadth of skills. So it is in that vein, for the 14 or so of you, that I'll just make sure you have a link to our careers page. And if at any point you want to discuss things not in a recruitment capacity, but just learn more about these service offerings, then certainly the contact page can get conversations going, or just info@beeswax.net.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Had planned to mention follow-up to this. bzPython, there's a version up there. We're working on some additional improvements to the interface and the installation process. To get in touch with us, you can go through our website. You can fill out the contact form. You can email us at any address you find, info at. I'm Jay@beeswax.net. This is this Meetup has a lot of it has been like the Meetup website. A lot of it has been partnership with Dig.FM, which is a Meetup that has been around for many, many years, and it's one of many that happen in the FileMaker community. I think I know, I recognize most of the names here, so great that everyone could join us. There are monthly Dig.FM events, and of course Meetups for lots of other locations, Portland, Seattle, LA on the West Coast, and plenty more across the rest of the US and worldwide. So thanks everybody for attending, but I appreciate you giving up your time on Friday and having an interest in this and joining us.